The deceptive summit. The stars beyond the viewport of Halcyon 7 station burned with cold indifference. Commander Sarah Reeves stood in the observation deck, watching those distant suns while her reflection stared back at her. She was 42 years old, with sharp features that had grown sharper during 3 years of war. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her dress uniform carried no decorations for valor. She had never wanted medals. She had only wanted to keep people alive. Today she might fail at that. The Kryn Dominion had proposed these peace talks 6 weeks ago. Their message had arrived through diplomatic channels, formal and respectful. They spoke of ending hostilities, of finding common ground, of building a future where humans and Kryn could coexist. The words had been beautiful. They had also been lies. 3 days after the Kryn proposal arrived, a defector had made contact with human intelligence. The defector was a low-level communications officer who had stumbled across the real plan. The peace talks were theater. The Kryn intended to seize Halcyon 7 during negotiations, capture the human delegation, and force Earth to surrender by threatening to execute their diplomats on live broadcast across the galaxy. It was a strategy the Kryn had used before, twice in fact, against the Talari Republic and the Moken Collective. Both times it had worked perfectly. Both species now served the Dominion as conquered vassals. Sarah had volunteered to come anyway. When her superiors protested that it was too dangerous, she had reminded them that danger was the point. If the Kryn expected humans to refuse the talks, they would simply attack elsewhere. Better to control the battlefield, better to turn their trap into humanity's advantage. So here she stood on Halcyon 7, with only a small security detail and 3 junior diplomats. Bait for a trap within a trap. Behind her the door slid open with a soft hiss. Lieutenant James Porter entered, his hand resting casually near his sidearm. Porter was young, only 26, but he had seen combat on the frontier colonies. He understood what was at stake. "Commander, the Kryn delegation is arriving," he said quietly. "War Master Terran himself is leading them." Sarah turned from the viewport. "How many ships?" 43 in close orbit. Another 100 holding position at the system's edge. Their formation looks ceremonial, but it's optimized to surround the station quickly. She nodded. Everything was proceeding exactly as intelligence predicted. The Kryn were arrogant. They had conquered 4 species in the last century, and they believed humans would be the 5th. They had never faced an enemy that could match their military technology, let alone surpass it. They were about to learn differently. The conference chamber was designed for neutrality. Circular, with no head of the table. Soft lighting that accommodated both human and Kryn visual spectrums. The air was kept at a temperature comfortable for both species. Everything about the room spoke of equality and mutual respect. War Master Terran entered with 6 attendants. He was massive, nearly 3 meters tall, with armored scales that gleamed like polished obsidian. His face was reptilian, with vertical pupils and a ridge of bone that crowned his skull. When he spoke, his voice was deep and resonant. "Commander Reeves, the Dominion honors you with our presence. Let us speak of peace." Sarah bowed slightly, matching the Kryn gesture of respect. "War Master, humanity is grateful for this opportunity. Too much blood has been spilled. It is time for a different path." Theron's attendants arranged themselves around the table. Sarah noted their positions carefully. 3 were clearly warriors, their movements precise and controlled. 2 were advisors, elderly Kryn with scholarly bearing. The 6th was younger, with quick eyes that studied everything. That one interested her. There was intelligence in those eyes and perhaps doubt. The negotiations began with the expected formalities. They discussed border territories and trade routes. They spoke of prisoner exchanges and colonial rights. Sarah played her role perfectly, proposing terms that were reasonable but slightly disadvantageous to humanity. She needed the Kryn to believe they were winning. Hours passed. The sun of Halcyon 7's system moved across the sky, visible through the station's viewports. Sarah's junior diplomats took detailed notes. Lieutenant Porter and his security team remained alert, but unobtrusive. Everything appeared normal. Beneath the surface, tension coiled like a compressed spring. The young Kryn officer, whose name was Vex, watched Commander Reeves with growing confusion. She was not what he expected. The Dominion's intelligence reports described humans as emotional and irrational, prone to outbursts and poor strategic thinking. Yet this human showed neither weakness nor aggression. She was calm, measured, and her proposals were thoughtfully constructed. Vex had served the Dominion for 8 years. He believed in its mission to bring order to the chaotic galaxy. But recently, doubts had crept into his thoughts. The Talari had not seemed chaotic. The Moken had not appeared to need ordering. They had simply been different, and the Dominion had crushed them for it. Now, watching Commander Reeves negotiate with genuine diplomatic skill, Vex wondered if the humans were truly the threat War Master Terran described. They fought fiercely when attacked, yes, but what species would not defend itself? Perhaps there was another way. Perhaps these peace talks could actually succeed. Then War Master Terran gave the signal. It was subtle, a slight gesture with his clawed hand that none of the humans would recognize. But Vex saw it and his heart sank. The betrayal was beginning. Kryn warriors hidden throughout the station began moving toward the conference chamber. Outside, the 43 warships surrounding Halcyon 7 adjusted their positions, tightening the noose. Weapons systems that had been powered down began charging up. Shield generators hummed to life. War Master Terran rose from his seat, his full height dominating the room. "Commander Reeves, I must inform you that circumstances have changed." Sarah stood as well, her expression showing appropriate surprise and concern. Inside, she felt only cold calculation. "War Master? I don't understand." "The Dominion has decided that negotiation is insufficient. You and your delegation are now prisoners of war. Your escort ships will surrender immediately, or we will destroy them. You will help us compose a message to Earth, explaining that humanity must submit to Dominion authority." Porter and his security team reached for their weapons, but Kryn warriors burst through the doors, disruptors aimed and ready. They were outnumbered 5 to 1. Resistance would be suicide. Sarah raised her hands slowly, signaling her team to stand down. She looked directly at Terran, and when she spoke, her voice was steady. "You've done this before. To the Talari, to the Moken. You invite them to peace talks, then betray them when they're vulnerable." Terran's mouth opened in what might have been a smile. "A successful strategy deserves repetition. Your species will learn what the others learned. The Dominion always prevails." "Yes," Sarah said quietly. "You always prevail against species weaker than yourselves. But you've made one critical miscalculation." "And what is that?" "You assumed we were weak." Sarah's hand moved to her collar, pressing a concealed button. It was the signal Fleet Admiral Marcus Chen had been waiting for. 3 light hours away, hidden in the dense gases of the Typhon Nebula, 200 human warships received the transmission. They had been waiting in complete silence for 6 hours, all systems running cold to avoid detection. Now in perfect synchronization, their reactors powered up. Weapons charged, shields activated, navigation systems locked coordinates. Admiral Chen sat in the command chair of the Dreadnought Vanguard and watched his tactical display come alive with green icons. 200 ships under his command, 200 crews ready to fight. They were outnumbered by the Kryn fleet, but numbers meant little when surprise and technology were on your side. "All ships report ready," his tactical officer announced. Chen allowed himself a thin smile. The Kryn had brought their fleet to Halcyon 7, expecting to crush a small human escort force. They had positioned themselves perfectly for a ceremonial victory. In doing so, they had created the ideal conditions for an ambush. "Signal all vessels," Chen ordered. "Jump on my mark. Weapons free upon arrival. Target priority is their capital ships. We end this quickly." He thought of Commander Reeves on that station, surrounded by enemies, trusting him to arrive in time. He would not fail her. "All ships," Chen said clearly. "Jump." Space folded. 200 warships vanished from the nebula and reappeared in the Halcyon 7 system in a blaze of displaced energy. They emerged from hyperspace in perfect attack formation, already firing. The Battle of Halcyon 7 had begun. The first human missiles struck before the Kryn fleet could react. Railgun slugs traveling at relativistic speeds punched through ceremonial shield configurations, like stones through paper. 3 Kryn cruisers exploded in brilliant flashes, their reactor cores breaching under the sudden assault. War Master Terran felt the station shudder beneath his feet as human weapons hammered the surrounding fleet. His mandibles clicked in shock and rage. Impossible. Our sensors detected nothing. Commander Reeves smiled coldly. Your sensors were looking for active ships. We gave you dead ones, cold running in the nebula for 6 hours. You never had a chance. The Kryn warriors guarding the conference chamber hesitated, uncertain whether to maintain their positions or respond to the larger crisis. Lieutenant Porter saw the opening and moved with practiced speed. His sidearm cleared its holster and fired twice. 2 Kryn warriors dropped, their armor no protection against human plasma rounds at close range. Sarah's other security personnel drew weapons simultaneously. The room erupted into chaos. Disruptor bolts scorched the air while plasma fire answered back. One of Sarah's diplomats went down with a cry, clutching her shoulder. Porter dragged her behind an overturned table while returning fire. "Get the commander to the escape pods," Porter shouted above the weapons fire. Vex watched the violence unfold with growing horror. This was not how the Dominion operated. They were supposed to be the superior force, the inevitable conquerors. Yet somehow the humans had known. They had prepared. They had turned the Dominion's own strategy against them. War Master Terran roared commands, but half his warriors were already dead or dying. The humans fought with desperate efficiency, every shot placed with precision. Terran himself grabbed a fallen disruptor and fired at Commander Reeves, but she had already moved, rolling behind cover with surprising agility for a diplomat. Outside the station, Admiral Chen watched the battle unfold on his tactical display. The Kryn fleet was scrambling to respond, but they were fatally out of position. Their capital ships had been arranged for maximum visual impact, spread across the system in a show of force. Now that same distribution made it impossible for them to support each other. "All squadrons execute attack pattern Delta," Chen ordered calmly. "Focus fire on their command vessels. Cripple their coordination first." Human warships moved like wolves through the confused Kryn formation. The destroyer Horizon, commanded by Captain Julia Torres, led a strike group against a Kryn battlecruiser twice her size. Torres was 34, a veteran of the frontier wars, and she knew that in space combat, speed and precision beat mass every time. "Target their sensor arrays," she commanded. "Blind them before they can orient." The Horizon's weapons spoke in synchronized fury. Missiles streaked across the void, while particle beams carved through armor plating. The Kryn battlecruiser tried to turn, tried to bring its main guns to bear, but it was too slow. The Horizon danced around its blind spots, striking with surgical accuracy. Within 2 minutes, the battlecruiser was drifting, its bridge destroyed, its weapons offline, its crew either dead or struggling with failing life support. Torres allowed herself no satisfaction. There were 42 more targets in the system. "Next target locked," her tactical officer reported. "Kryn heavy cruiser, bearing 270. Engage." Aboard the Kryn flagship Dominator, War Master Theron's second-in-command, strategic leader Corvin, watched his fleet die. Ship after ship reported catastrophic damage or complete destruction. The humans were everywhere at once, their coordination flawless, their tactics devastating. "Strategic leader, what are your orders?" His communications officer asked desperately. Corvin's mind raced through options. They could scatter and flee, but human ships were faster. They could concentrate for a defensive stand, but human weapons were more powerful. They could attempt a boarding action against the human flagship, but their assault craft would be destroyed before reaching their target. There were no good options. The Dominion fleet, the pride of 4 conquered civilizations, was being systematically dismantled. "Signal all ships," Corvin said, his voice heavy with bitter acceptance. "Defensive formation around the Dominator. We make our stand here." On Halcyon 7, Sarah and her team fought their way through the station's corridors. Bodies littered the floor, both human and Kryn. Porter moved ahead, checking corners and clearings rooms with professional efficiency. Behind them, more Kryn warriors gave chase, their disruptors scorching the walls. "Escape pods are 3 sections ahead," one of Sarah's diplomats gasped. The young man was bleeding from a wound in his leg but kept moving. An explosion rocked the station. Through a viewport, Sarah glimpsed a Kryn destroyer breaking apart under human fire. Debris scattered in all directions, glittering in the starlight like deadly confetti. They rounded a corner and came face to face with a squad of Kryn warriors. Porter fired instantly, dropping the lead warrior, but there were too many. Sarah felt something hot slice across her arm. Pain blossomed, but training kept her moving. She grabbed a fallen disruptor and fired it one-handed, the unfamiliar weapon bucking in her grip. Then Lieutenant Porter was there, standing between her and the Kryn, his weapon blazing. He took a disruptor bolt to the chest that would have killed Sarah. His armor held, but the impact drove him to one knee. "Go," he shouted. "I'll hold them. We're not leaving you," Sarah snapped back. "That's an order, Commander. Complete the mission." Before Sarah could argue, young Vex appeared from a side corridor. The Kryn officer's weapon was not aimed at the humans, but at his own people. He fired twice and 2 Kryn warriors fell. "This way," Vex said in heavily accented English. "I know a faster route to the escape pods." Porter stared at him in shock. "Why are you helping us?" "Because this is wrong. All of it is wrong. The Dominion has lied to us. Now follow me, or we all die here." They ran, Vex leading them through maintenance tunnels and service corridors. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit faded. The station shuddered again as another nearby ship exploded. In space, the Kryn defensive formation was collapsing. Admiral Chen's fleet had destroyed or disabled over half the enemy vessels in just 20 minutes of combat. The remaining Kryn ships clustered around their flagship in a desperate protective sphere. Chen studied the tactical display with cold calculation. He could finish them now, concentrate all his firepower on that defensive formation, and wipe out what remained of the Kryn fleet. It would cost human lives, but it would guarantee total victory, or he could offer them a choice. Communications. Open a channel to the Kryn flagship. All frequencies. His communications officer looked surprised but complied. "Channel open, Admiral." Chen spoke clearly, knowing his words would be heard on every Kryn bridge. "This is Fleet Admiral Marcus Chen of the Human Defense Fleet. Your ambush has failed. Your fleet is broken. You have fought bravely, but you have lost. I offer you this one chance to surrender with honor. Power down your weapons and shields. You will be treated according to the laws of war. This offer expires in 5 minutes." On the Dominator, Strategic Leader Corvin listened to the human admiral's words. Around him, his bridge crew waited for orders. Some looked hopeful. Others appeared ready to fight to the last breath. War Master Theron's voice crackled over the command channel from the station. "Strategic Leader, ignore their offer. All ships prepare to ram the human vessels. We die with honor." Corvin looked at the tactical display, at the remaining ships under his command, at the young warriors who trusted him to lead them wisely. He thought about the Talari, who had resisted and been exterminated. He thought about the Moken, who had surrendered and been enslaved. Neither option had ended well for the Dominion's previous enemies. But the humans were offering something different. "A third path, War Master," Corvin said slowly. "I must respectfully decline that order." Silence on the channel. Then Theron's voice, thick with rage. "You dare defy me?" "I dare to save lives. The battle is lost. Our people on these ships deserve a chance to see their homes again. I am ordering all vessels to power down weapons and shields. We surrender." Some ships complied immediately. Others hesitated. A few, still loyal to Theron's suicidal command, tried to break formation for ramming attacks. Human ships intercepted them with precisely targeted fire, disabling their engines without destroying them completely. Within 10 minutes, the Kryn fleet was entirely captured or neutralized. Not a single ship had escaped. Sarah and her team reached the escape pods with Vex's help. As they sealed themselves inside and launched toward the human fleet, Sarah looked back at Halcyon 7. The station was damaged, but intact. Through the viewport, she could see the Kryn flagship Dominator. Surrounded by human vessels, its weapons dark. "We won," her wounded diplomat whispered, barely believing it. "We survived," Sarah corrected. "Now comes the harder part, building something from this." She looked at Vex, who sat apart from the humans, his expression unreadable. "Why did you help us?" The young Kryn officer was quiet for a long moment. "Because I realized the Dominion was wrong. We are not bringing order to chaos. We are simply imposing our will on those who cannot resist. That is not civilization. That is tyranny," Sarah nodded slowly. "Will others see it that way?" "Some will. Others will call me traitor. But perhaps that is a start." The escape pod docked with the Vanguard 30 minutes later. Admiral Chen himself was waiting as Sarah emerged, her arm bandaged but her bearing still composed. "Commander Reeves, welcome aboard, Admiral. I believe we have prisoners to process and a peace to negotiate." "The real one this time," Chen smiled grimly. "That we do. That we do." Victory and new beginnings. The medical bay of the Vanguard was crowded with wounded from both sides. Human medics moved between beds. treating injuries without regard for species. A Kryn warrior with severe burns lay beside a human pilot with a shattered leg. Both received the same quality of care, the same urgent attention. Admiral Chen walked through the bay with Commander Reeves, both observing the aftermath of their victory. The human casualties were lighter than expected. 47 dead, 112 wounded. The Kryn had lost over 3,000 warriors in the battle, with another 7,000 injured or captured. They fought well, Chen said quietly, even when they knew they had lost. Courage is not the issue, Sarah replied. Neither is their capability. The problem is how they use those qualities. They found War Master Terran in a secured medical room, under guard but receiving treatment for his injuries. He had been badly wounded during the fighting on Halcyon 7, caught in an explosion as he tried to rally his warriors for a final stand. His armor was scorched, his scales cracked, but his eyes still burned with defiance. Chen stood at the foot of his bed. War Master, I'm Admiral Marcus Chen. We need to discuss terms. Theron's voice was weak but venomous. I will discuss nothing with you. The Dominion does not surrender. The Dominion already has. Strategic leader Corvin surrendered your fleet. The battle is over. Corvin is a coward and a traitor. Sarah stepped forward. Corvin saved thousands of lives, both Kryn and human. That's not cowardice. That's wisdom. Theron tried to laugh, but it came out as a cough. You speak of wisdom? You who ambushed us during peace talks. We responded to your ambush with a better one, Sarah said coldly. You came here planning to capture my delegation and force Earth to surrender. Did you think we wouldn't discover your plan? Did you think we would simply walk into your trap? For the first time, uncertainty flickered in Theron's eyes. How did you know? Someone in your ranks grew a conscience. They warned us about your true intentions. Then we made sure you never saw our fleet coming, Chen added. The Dominion has conquered 4 species using variations of this strategy. Invite them to negotiate, betray them, force surrender through hostage execution. It worked against enemies who were weaker and less prepared. It failed against us. Theron said nothing. There was nothing to say. The strategy that had built the Dominion's empire had finally met its match. In another part of the ship, Vex sat in a conference room facing a panel of human officers. They had been questioning him for hours, trying to determine if his defection was genuine or an elaborate deception. Why did you help Commander Reeves? Asked Captain Torres, who sat on the panel. You betrayed your own people. Your own War Master. Vex chose his words carefully. I did not betray my people. I tried to save them from their own worst instincts. The Dominion's path leads only to more war, more death, more hatred. Someone had to choose differently. You could have stayed silent. Let the battle play out. Why risk your life for humans? Because it was the right thing to do. Vex met their eyes steadily. Is that not reason enough? The panel members exchanged glances. Finally, an intelligence officer named Colonel Hayes spoke. We've verified your identity and your service record. You're exactly who you claim to be. A junior officer with no prior contact with human forces. Either you're the most sophisticated spy we've ever encountered, or you're telling the truth. I am telling the truth. Then we have a proposal for you. The Dominion will need new leadership. Leadership that understands cooperation instead of conquest. We believe you could help build that. Vex was silent, processing the implications. You want me to return to my people as... What, a collaborator? As a bridge, Sarah said, entering the room. Someone who can help both our species find a better way forward. 3 days later, formal negotiations began aboard a neutral merchant vessel that had responded to emergency calls during the battle. Representatives from Earth and from the surviving Kryn leadership met under the watchful eyes of neutral observers from the Telari Republic, one of the Dominion's conquered species. Strategic leader Corvin led the Kryn delegation. He had been confirmed as acting commander of all Dominion forces after Theron was declared unfit due to his injuries and his refusal to accept reality. Corvin was pragmatic, intelligent, and deeply aware of his species' precarious position. Sarah led the human negotiating team. Admiral Chen attended as military advisor, but the discussions were diplomatic, not martial. Let us be clear about the situation, Sarah began. Humanity did not start this war. We have defended ourselves against Dominion aggression for 3 years. Yesterday we defeated your fleet decisively. We could demand harsh terms. We could occupy Dominion territory. We could do to you what you have done to others. Corvin's scales darkened, a sign of shame among his people. Yes, you could, but we won't. Instead, we offer you peace. Real peace, not submission. Here are our terms. Sarah outlined humanity's proposal. The Dominion would release all conquered species and grant them independence. War criminals, specifically those involved in atrocities against civilian populations, would face trial. The Dominion's military would be reduced, but not eliminated. They would retain enough ships to defend their home systems, but not enough to threaten their neighbors. Most importantly, both humans and Kryn would join a new interspecies council designed to prevent future wars. Corvin studied the terms carefully. These are surprisingly generous. Why? Because destroying you serves no purpose, Chen said. It would only create generations of resentment and future conflict. We want partners, not vassals. Can you understand that? It is difficult to understand. The Dominion has never offered such terms to defeated enemies. Then perhaps it's time the Dominion learned a new way. The negotiations continued for 2 weeks. Details were hammered out, compromises reached, concerns addressed. The Talari representatives watched in amazement as their former conquerors agreed to terms that would have been unthinkable months earlier. On the 15th day, the Treaty of Halcyon 7 was signed. Humanity and the Kryn Dominion formally ended hostilities. The conquered species were guaranteed independence. A joint council would be established to mediate future disputes. When it was done, Corvin approached Sarah privately. Commander Reeves, I must ask, if our positions were reversed, would you have been so merciful? Sarah considered the question honestly. I don't know, but I hope we would have had the wisdom to recognize when mercy serves everyone better than vengeance. 5 years passed. The galaxy transformed in ways no one had anticipated. The former Dominion territory was now the Kryn Republic, a democratic government that had replaced the old military hierarchy. Vex served as their representative to the Interspecies Council, his actions during the Battle of Halcyon 7 having made him a symbol of change. The Talari and Moken thrived as independent worlds once again. They maintained cautious but growing relationships with both humans and Kryn. Old wounds healed slowly, but they did heal. Captain Torres, promoted to Commodore, commanded a joint patrol fleet with both human and Kryn ships. They protected trade routes and responded to emergencies without regard for which species needed help. Admiral Chen had retired, though he served as an advisor to the Council. He spent much of his time writing a detailed history of the war, determined that future generations would understand both its causes and its costs. War Master Terran remained imprisoned on a secure facility, having been convicted of war crimes. He still refused to accept that the Dominion's way was wrong. He would die believing he had been right. Commander Sarah Reeves, now Ambassador Reeves, stood on a balcony overlooking New Unity, the first joint human-Kryn colony. Below her, members of both species worked together, building something unprecedented. Children of both races played in parks, learning each other's languages, seeing each other as neighbors rather than enemies. Vex joined her on the balcony. The young Kryn had aged in 5 years, his scales showing the first signs of maturity markings. But his eyes held wisdom beyond his years. Do you think it will last? He asked. This peace we've built. Sarah watched a human child help a young Kryn with a piece of playground equipment. I think peace is like that. It requires constant work, constant attention. The moment we stop trying, it begins to fall apart. The Dominion believed strength alone was enough. Strength without wisdom is just violence, and violence alone never builds anything lasting. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors neither species had names for. Somewhere in the city below, a mixed choir was practicing, human and Kryn voices blending in harmony. The war had ended not with annihilation, but with understanding, not with submission, but with respect. It had taken 3 years of conflict and one decisive battle to prove that a different path was possible. Now, 5 years later, that path stretched ahead into a future neither species would walk alone. The conference hall on New Unity fell silent as the holographic display activated. Ambassador Sarah Reeves stood before an audience of 300 diplomats, academics, and military personnel from 7 different species. Today marked the 5th anniversary of the Treaty of Halcyon 7, but the ceremony carried more weight than simple celebration. We gather to remember, Sarah began, her voice steady but solemn. Not to glorify war, but to honor those who died in it. To ensure their sacrifice means something lasting. The hologram shifted, showing images of the battle, burning ships, exploding stations, bodies floating in the void. The audience watched in uncomfortable silence. Many had lived through those days. Others knew them only as history. Both groups needed to see the truth. A young human officer in the front row shifted uncomfortably. Lieutenant David Chen was Admiral Marcus Chen's grandson, assigned to the Joint Patrol Fleet. He had been 12 years old during the war, old enough to remember the fear but too young to understand the complexity. Now at 17, he was beginning to grasp what his grandfather's generation had endured. Beside him sat Junior Strategic Officer Kara, a Kryn female barely into adulthood. Her scales still showed the bright patterns of youth. She had been only a hatchling during the war, but she carried the weight of her species' actions nonetheless. After the ceremony, David and Kara walked together through the memorial gardens. Names were carved into stone walls, thousands of them, both human and Kryn. The dead did not care about species distinctions. "My instructor says we should not dwell on the past," Kara said quietly. "That looking back prevents moving forward." David touched one of the names, running his fingers over the carved letters. "My grandfather says we have to remember, or we're doomed to repeat our mistakes. But I think maybe both are true. Remember, but don't get stuck." They continued walking until they reached a section of the garden neither had visited before. Here, separate from the military casualties, stood markers for civilians killed during the war, colonists caught in crossfire, station workers who died when battles damaged life support, families destroyed by orbital bombardments. One marker caught David's attention. It listed an entire colony, New Providence, with a death toll of 47,000. He felt his stomach tighten. "I remember this," he said slowly. "My grandfather was there. He commanded the defense of the system, but they arrived too late. The Dominion bombardment had already begun." Kara's scales darkened with shame. "The Dominion did many terrible things. My people have much to atone for. You weren't responsible. You were a child, but my people were. That responsibility does not vanish simply because I was young." They stood together in heavy silence, two young officers bearing the weight of a history they had not created, but would inherit nonetheless. Across the colony, in a secure medical facility, War Master Terran lay dying. His body, ravaged by old injuries and 5 years of imprisonment, was finally failing. The human doctors had offered advanced treatments that could extend his life, but he had refused them all. "I will not accept mercy from those I should have conquered," he had rasped. Now, as his breathing grew labored, he received an unexpected visitor. Vex entered the medical room, his diplomatic robes seeming out of place in the sterile environment. "War Master," Vex said, inclining his head respectfully despite everything. Theron's eyes opened slowly. "Traitor. Come to gloat over my death? I came to ask if you have any final words. Any message for your people?" "My people?" Theron's laugh turned into a coughing fit. "They are no longer my people. They follow your path now, the path of weakness and surrender." Vex settled into a chair beside the bed. "Is peace truly weakness? Is cooperation truly surrender?" "Yes." Theron's voice was fading but still fierce. "The strong dominate. The weak submit. That is the natural order. The Dominion understood this. We brought order to chaos, purpose to meaninglessness. You brought death to billions. You enslaved entire species. You called it order, but it was simply tyranny. And what has your way achieved? A fragile alliance held together by fear of renewed conflict. How long before old hatreds resurface? How long before someone decides conquest is easier than cooperation?" Vex had no answer to that. It was a question that haunted him in quiet moments. Theron seemed to sense his doubt. "You know I am right. Peace is temporary. War is eternal. When your alliance crumbles, as it will, my way will return. Because my way works." "Perhaps," Vex said quietly, "but perhaps there is value in trying something different, even if it might fail. At least we try." Theron closed his eyes. "Then you are a fool, and your people will pay for your foolishness." Those were his last words. War Master Theron, architect of 4 successful conquests and 1 catastrophic defeat, died without ever accepting that another way was possible. News of Theron's death spread quickly through the interspecies networks. Reactions were mixed. Some celebrated the death of a war criminal. Others mourned the loss of a warrior who had believed in his cause with absolute conviction. Most simply noted his passing and moved on with their lives. But in the darker corners of the galaxy, in places where old Dominion loyalists gathered in secret, Terran's death became a rallying cry. They called him a martyr, a victim of human aggression and Kryn weakness. They swore that the Dominion would rise again, stronger and purer than before. Intelligence services on both Earth and the Kryn homeworld tracked these groups carefully. They remained small, disorganized, and largely ineffective, but they existed, a reminder that not everyone had accepted the new order. Commodore Julia Torres received reports about these loyalist cells during her regular security briefings. She took them seriously but not alarmingly. Every peace created its dissenters. What mattered was preventing them from gaining enough support to threaten the fragile stability. "How many ships do we estimate they have access to?" she asked her intelligence officer. "Maybe a dozen light cruisers and twice that in smaller vessels. Old Dominion surplus that was supposed to be decommissioned. Someone's been hiding them in the outer systems. Enough to raid a small colony, but not enough to threaten major worlds." Correct. But if they start hitting soft targets, it could destabilize the alliance. Fear is contagious. Torres studied the star charts showing suspected loyalist bases. Increase patrol frequency in those sectors. "I want eyes on every suspicious signal. If they're planning something, I want to know before it happens. And if we catch them, then we demonstrate that this alliance has teeth." Peace doesn't mean weakness. On Earth, retired Admiral Marcus Chen sat in his study, reviewing the latest draft of his war history. The book was nearly complete, a comprehensive account of the conflict from its origins through the Battle of Halcyon 7 and into the peace that followed. But Chen found himself struggling with the final chapter. How did you conclude a story that was still being written? How did you assess the success or failure of a piece that was only 5 years old? His grandson David called from New Unity, his image appearing on Chen's communication screen. "Grandfather, I attended the memorial ceremony today. Ambassador Reeves spoke about the importance of remembering. Sarah always had a gift for finding the right words, but some of the older officers talk about it differently. They want to remember the victory, not the cost. Like the war was something glorious that we won." Chen set down his stylus. "War is never glorious, David. It's necessary sometimes, tragic always, but never glorious. Anyone who tells you different either hasn't experienced it or has forgotten the truth. The Kryn officer I work with, Kara, she carries so much guilt for what her species did. I tried to tell her it wasn't her fault, but I'm not sure she believes it. Good people often carry guilt for things they didn't do, while bad people feel nothing for the harm they cause. It's one of the universe's cruel ironies." Chen paused. "Help her understand that she's not responsible for her ancestors' actions, but she is responsible for her own choices. And choosing to work for peace is a good choice." After the call ended, Chen returned to his manuscript. He typed slowly, choosing each word with care. The Battle of Halcyon 7 ended a war, but did not end the possibility of future conflict. Peace is not a destination, but a journey, requiring constant vigilance and renewal. We defeated the Kryn Dominion not to destroy them, but to change them, and in doing so we were changed as well. Whether this peace will endure for decades or collapse within years remains uncertain. What is certain is that both species must choose peace every day in small actions and large decisions. The moment we stop choosing it, the moment we decide that conquest is easier than cooperation, we will have lost everything we fought to achieve." He read the words back, nodded in satisfaction, and saved the file. His war history was complete, but the story it told was far from finished. In the loyalist base hidden in the outer reach, a gathering of hardline Dominion supporters listened as their leader addressed them. Strategic Commander Vara was a veteran of the old wars, scarred and bitter, who had refused the surrender order 5 years ago and fled into the darkness. "Warmaster Terran is dead," Vara announced, his voice echoing through the converted cargo hold that served as their meeting place. "Murdered by human medicine and Kryn betrayal. But his vision lives on. The Dominion will rise again." The gathered loyalists clicked their approval, a sound like breaking bones. The soft leadership in our homeworld has forgotten our strength. They negotiate when they should dominate. They cooperate when they should conquer. But we remember the old ways, and soon the galaxy will remember them too. Vara gestured to a tactical display showing a small human colony on the frontier. Our first target. We strike quickly, take what we need and vanish before their patrols respond. We show the galaxy that humanity's victory was temporary and their alliance is fragile. Among the gathered loyalists, one figure remained silent. Junior Tactical Officer Shen had joined this group seeking purpose after the war, believing the old ways were better. But listening to Vara speak of raids and terror, Shen felt doubt creeping in. This was not the honor Theron had spoken of. This was not the order the Dominion had claimed to bring. This was simply violence for its own sake. Dressed up in patriotic language, Shen made a decision. Someone needed to warn the Alliance. Someone needed to stop this before more innocent beings died. The peace that had seemed so solid was about to be tested. If you're ready to see humanity rise from the ashes of lies, hit that like button. Comment below and tell us, how will humanity's wrath change the galaxy? Make sure to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any of the action. The hunt for Extinction has begun, and you won't want to miss what comes next in this epic HFY saga. Join the fight today. Comment for next part.